the stranger of 8 years, I never imagined that one day I would be living in a house that wasn't actually mine. It happened one late afternoon. I opened my mailbox, expecting the usual pile of flyers and bills. But that day, every single envelope was addressed to someone named Mr. Xiao. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, perhaps a marketing database error. But the flyers kept coming, increasing in volume. Soon, they were joined by bank statements and financing offers, all under that unfamiliar name. Something didn't feel right. My name is Wei. This 3-story townhouse in Taiwan was the first real asset I ever owned. I bought it in 2004, paid the mortgage diligently for over a decade. I knew every crack in the tiles, every window latch. This place held my youth, my dreams, my sweat. But from the moment I saw that name, Mr. Xiao, printed again and again in my own mailbox, I started to question something I had never doubted before. Is this still my house? I checked the land registry. When the screen showed that the property had been transferred to a Aishao, something in 2016, my heart dropped. I had been living in someone else's property for 8 years, without even knowing it. It all started in 2014. Back then, I had a boyfriend named Dahai. One day he approached me and said he needed to borrow my house, not to live in, but to use as collateral so a friend of his could get through a financial rough patch. I hesitated, of course. That kind of thing isn't a small favor. But he reassured me repeatedly, saying it was just a short-term second mortgage. Only for NT 2 million. Nothing risky, he said. You won't lose a thing. I wanted to believe him. After all, we were in a relationship. Trust is supposed to mean something. But I didn't know that what he borrowed wasn't NT 2 million. It was NT 4 million. And he didn't just set up a second mortgage, he registered a NT 6 million lien against the property. The following year, he came to me again, saying he needed to remove the lien and needed the property documents. I remember the moment so clearly. I handed over the deed, land certificate, and every official paper tied to that home. I thought I was helping him solve a bureaucratic headache. But in truth, I had just handed over my future. I later found out the truth. Dahai had already fallen in with a property fraud ring, led by a man named Liu Weifeng and a notary surnamed Tiseng. They forged my signature, faked documents, and sold my 3-story townhouse for NT of 14.2 million to a man I had never met, Xiao. And that was just the beginning. I dug deeper. What I found about the man who nowned my house, Xiao, made my skin crawl. When he applied for a mortgage, he reported a monthly salary of just NT 35,000. That's barely enough to rent a small apartment in Taichung, let alone afford a multi-million property. And yet, the bank approved him for a home loan covering 80% of the house's alleged value, NT 18 million. On top of that, they threw in a personal loan of NT 270 Zalanzan, the total NT 11.45 million. I couldn't believe it. No one in their right mind would grant that kind of loan based on those numbers. But this bank not only approved it, they stamped it all the way through. What did he do with the money? First, he used it to pay off my original mortgage, about NT 3.58 million. Then he covered his own insurance premiums totaling over NT 300,000. And the rest, NT's 0.57 million, he withdrew entirely, gone. Just like that. But the scam didn't stop there. The fraud ring went a step further. They took out a second mortgage, again, this time in the name of a woman surnamed Sai. Another NT 4 million piled on top of my home. A property I didn't even know I no longer owned, now buried in debt. I was shaking with rage, but the only weapon I had left was the law. I filed a civil lawsuit against the fraud ring and the bank, seeking full damages of NT 14.2 million, the amount they sold my house for. On April 7th, the Taichung District Court held its first hearing. The bank's defense attorney argued that the mortgage approval process from 8 years ago couldn't be judged by today's standards. But my lawyer, Liu Qiang, struck back hard. A borrower's ability to repay has always been the most basic criterion. It's not a matter of outdated standards. This house already had a private lien on it. A responsible bank would have demanded it be cleared before approving a new loan. Instead, the bank staff approved it without question. Liu was calm but firm. He announced that next hearing, He would request to summon the bank's internal credit officer, a man named Lei, who had approved Yi Xiao's suspicious mortgage. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone believed me. And that gave me strength. On the day of the next hearing, a woman named Sai Marong sat nervously on the witness stand. Her hands trembled in her lap. I met Liu Weifeng in July 2016, she said, her voice shaking. He said he was a real estate consultant and introduced me to what he called a safe short-term investment. He showed me land titles and deeds all under Mr. Xiao's name. Everything looked legitimate. She paused and looked at me. I didn't know the house had been stolen. I thought I was just lending money. I signed a contract, got interest payments. Everything seemed proper, until I received a legal notice from Ms. Li. She opened her notebook and began flipping through pages, painstakingly handwritten notes, photos of her meetings with Liu and others. In one, a man in a bank uniform stood behind them. Liu asked, "Do you recognize the man in this photo?" "Yes, he's Lei Guohao." Liu told me he was their inside contact at the bank. He said as long as Lei stamped the paperwork, the loan would be approved. I gasped. That was the name of the credit officer who approved the illegal loan on my home. Liu petitioned the court to summon Lei Guohao as a witness. He arrived dressed sharply in a gray suit, his face unreadable. He testified calmly, trying to distance himself from the fraud. I only handled the initial document check. Final loan decisions are made by the credit committee, he said. Liu presented a transcript of a private line chat between Liu and Sai. Don't worry. Lei's already approved it. You'll get the loan. Lei's expression twitched, just for a second. He denied everything, but the courtroom could feel the shift. I held my pen so tightly it nearly snapped. The truth was beginning to surface. One night, I returned home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a short note. If you want to know how Liu operates, find a man named Seng Diquan, a retired notary in Mayali. He got burned too. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I boarded a train to Mayali. Tiseng lived in a modest house. When I introduced myself, his face filled with guilt. I processed documents for Liu years ago. He admitted. I thought it was a legitimate transaction. He had signatures, stamps, and IDs. But later I learned it was all forged. He handed me a file. This is a backup I kept. It shows the kickback system. Bank staff got a 3% commission. I was paid NT 50,000. And the insider received red envelopes. It wasn't just a scam. It was an organized scheme. The final hearing was approaching, and I could barely sleep. Night after night, I had the same dream. I was back in 2014, handing Dahai the land documents while the sun streamed through the windows. He smiled, telling me it was just temporary. But the dream always ended with me alone, staring at an empty home. Even if I win, what will I really get back? I asked myself. But deep down, I knew if I quit now, they would do this to someone else. On April 7th, the court formally summoned Lei as a defendant. Liu submitted new evidence, a secretly recorded audio file sent by a whistleblower from the bank. In it, Lei could be heard saying, "Yeah, the lion's still on, but so what? We didn't catch it, we move forward. It's just paperwork. What if the owner complains? She's clueless. Her boyfriend's got it under control." The judge's face darkened. This court will consider this recording seriously and refer the matter to criminal investigators. The bank's attorneys, once arrogant, suddenly turned meek. One of them approached Liu during recess, offering to discuss settlement. "Do you want to settle?" Liu asked me. I looked at a photo of my parents standing proudly in front of our home. "No," I said. "This isn't just about money." Just days before the verdict, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. Why, it's me, Dahai. My breath caught. I hadn't heard that name in years. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. But Liu threatened me back then. I didn't know how to stop it. "I left something for you, the old storage room in our first apartment." I returned to that run-down unit, hands trembling. In a crevice behind a wall panel, I found a small taped box. Inside were 2 voice recorders and a SIM card. A sticky note read, "If you're no longer afraid, please use this." I sat in the dark listening to voices from years ago, deals, bribes, betrayals. This was the sword I needed for the final battle. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was gray and heavy. I stood outside the courthouse with the recording box in my hands, my palms damp with sweat. Lu Qiang, ever steady, put a hand on my shoulder. This is your story, and it's time to tell it. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers, reporters, even a few curious strangers. The judge's gavel fell. Proceed. Lu handed over the USB drive. We submit new evidence. A series of audio recordings provided by a former participant. They detail bribes, document forgeries, and names including that of defendant Lei Guohao. The judge listened carefully as voices played. Just stamp it, Lei. The owner's name won't cause trouble. Her boyfriend's got her under control. Same deal, $50K for you, red envelope next month. When the recordings ended, the courtroom was silent. The judge's tone grew stern. The authenticity of these recordings must be verified. But if verified, they significantly alter the legal standing of the defendants. This court will proceed accordingly. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I felt the tide had truly turned. 2 weeks later, I received a noticed verdict to be announced. I returned to my now empty house, every room echoing with memories. I had spent years afraid to claim ownership, fearing what I might lose again. But this house wasn't just brick and mortar. It was my fight, my wounds, and now, possibly, my victory. 3 months after the trial, I began cleaning the house in earnest. Behind a drawer in the kitchen, I found an envelope yellowed by time. It was from Dahai. Wei, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I wasn't just weak, I was a coward. I didn't protect you, I sold you out. But this house, it was your parents'. It was your dream. Please, if you can, don't let them take it. Make it yours again. I'm sorry. Dahai. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I burned the letter. Not out of hate, but as a ritual of letting go. I didn't need his apology to move on. I had already started. After the verdict, many people thought I would finally relax, maybe celebrate. But when I stood inside the house I had reclaimed, what I felt most was emptiness. The walls were stained, scarred by years of neglect. Nails still stuck out where pictures once hung, portraits of a future that never came to pass. I wanted to repaint, but I didn't know what color to choose. My friend Ning called. Why not hire a designer? I know someone good. No, I said, I want to do it myself. I bought a bucket of pale blue paint, the shade my mother always loved. She said it reminded her of the sky, of starting over. My first brush stroke was shaky. The second was steadier. By the third, my hands had stopped trembling. This wasn't just redecorating. It was reclaiming. 3 months after the judgment, I received a letter from the court. Lu Weifeng had been convicted in multiple fraud cases. His assets were frozen, and partial restitution was being arranged. I was due to receive $600,000, a fraction of what was stolen, but it was something. I didn't spend it on the house. Instead, I enrolled in a real estate law course. Not to change careers, but because I wanted to understand the system that nearly destroyed me. If I had known then what I know now. You're joining the wolves. Ning teased when I told her. No, I said, I'm learning to build fences. One quiet afternoon at the library, my phone vibrated. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Lai. This is Lin Yuqing from Faith Property Group. We've followed your case closely. We're establishing a legal aid program for property disputes. Would you consider joining us as an advisor? I'm not a lawyer. But you've lived what no textbook can teach. We need people like you. That night, I lay awake thinking. Maybe this wasn't just my story. The verdict was behind me, but healing had only begun. Faith Property Group followed through on their proposal. I began attending meetings, drafting outreach material, and consulting with victims who, like me, had no one to believe them. We launched a pilot project, the Housing Fraud Resilience Network. The name was long, but the mission was simple. No one else should face this system alone. After one of the early events, I noticed a man sitting alone in the last row. He hadn't taken notes, hadn't recorded anything, just listened. When the room cleared, he walked up to me. Ms. Li. I'm Lin Yuqing, the one who called. I hadn't expected him to be so soft-spoken. We've read everything, he said, but we wanted to hear it from you. That night, he walked me to the train station. We talked about architecture, loss, and resilience. Before I stepped onto the platform, I asked him, "Did something like this happen to you?" He nodded. "My mother, 10 years ago. She didn't survive it, but that was the first time I saw past the polite suit and into his quiet sorrow. Life regained a rhythm. I brewed tea, repainted doors, and answered emails from strangers whose lives had unraveled like mine once had. One day, I opened my door and found Yuching standing there with 2 cups of tea. "I wasn't sure if you'd had lunch," he said. We sat on the floor of the bare living room, steam rising between us. He looked around. "Your house isn't what I imagined, smaller." I asked. "No," he said. "More like you." That night, after he left, I sat by the window and realized I hadn't felt seen in years. The platform received a new case: a young mother fighting to keep her home after her ex-husband secretly mortgaged it and disappeared. When she came to the office, she was trembling. "I don't know what to do, but I can't lose the only place my daughter feels safe." Her voice cracked. I reached across the table and held her hand. "I do know, because I've been there, and I'll stand with you now." That night, I sat alone, remembering the echo of my own desperation in her words. But now, I wasn't just surviving, I was helping others survive too. The Housing Reform Forum was held in an old cultural hall. Architects, activists, legislators, all seated shoulder to shoulder. A documentary team hovered nearby. I was the final speaker. "I'm not a lawyer or an expert," I began. "I'm someone who lost everything because she trusted the wrong person, and a system that let him get away with it." I spoke of forged documents, silent banks, and a name that disappeared from a deed overnight. But I'm still here, and I don't want to be the last person this happens to. The crowd stood in silence, then erupted in applause. That night, as I stepped off the stage, Yuching met me with a quiet nod. "You didn't just speak, you shifted something." After the forum, we walked side by side through the quiet streets. "You've changed," he said. "Everyone does eventually." "No, you chose to, and that's different." He hesitated. "Way. If someday I left something here, a pair of shoes, a toothbrush, would that be all right?" I smiled. "Wes. Not because I needed someone to complete me, but because I was finally whole enough to choose companionship." Months later, I hosted the first housing fraud support circle in my own living room. 4 women gathered around a low table, each holding a cup of tea, each bearing a story of betrayal. Some cried. Some sat quietly. Some just listened. I didn't offer advice. I offered presence. And when one asked, "How did you get through it?" I answered honestly, I didn't. Not alone. But I learned how to keep moving. Yuching helped hang curtains and build shelves. We never called it moving in, but one day, his keys were on the counter beside mine. For the first time in 8 years, this house truly felt like mine again. Then came the envelope from City Watch magazine. "Memes Li Wei. Your case has ignited public discourse on housing justice and banking responsibility. We'd be honored to feature you as our cover story." Reclaiming what was taken. I held the envelope a long time. My name, once stamped on deeds, erased from documents, whispered in courtrooms, now printed as a voice. I accepted. Weeks later, I sat in the legislative yuan beside lawyers, researchers, and housing activists. I wasn't there to protest. I was there to propose policy. In the draft legislation, I saw a clause I'd helped write. All property lien applications must be independently verified and communicated to original deed holders prior to approval. I remembered the night I lost my home. Now, I was helping others keep theirs. That night, I stood on my balcony as Yuching approached with 2 coffees. He looked up, smiled, and raised a cup in salute. "You changed a law today." I smiled back. "And you changed how I see people." We sat by the window, the streetlights flickering like old film. No words, just the quiet certainty of shared space. "Is it home yet?" he asked. "It's not a battlefield anymore," I said. "It's a beginning." At the corner of our office, there's a visitor logbook. On the first page, in bold handwriting, is a single sentence. "Being a victim isn't the end. It's where the fight for change begins." Below it is my name. I used to think I was the stranger in this house, the intruder in my own life. Now I know I was never the stranger. I was the one who stayed.